So I got this dresser off of Facebook Marketplace for a great deal. It was only $20. It's good, solid construction, but it is going to need some work for sure. Some of the drawers are going to need some work as far as alignment and making sure they slide nicely. As well as the top, it's going to need some work as well, and it's delaminating in a few places, so I'm going to have to fix that up. Also, some of the drawers have dovetail joints that are actually coming apart where the glue just isn't working anymore. So I'm going to go ahead and just knock those out a little bit with a mallet to get some access, to get some glue in there. Put some glue in, make sure I wipe out the corners on the inside before it sets up, clamp them up, and they'll be good as new. For the top, I glued down all the loose pieces of laminate that were coming up rather than trying to take all the laminate off. I think that would have been more work to try and do it that way, although it could be done. But I filled in any other little cracks with some really good wood filler in the front as well in the back, and I had to fill this in a little bit more than I thought I would. I let it set up and then went and sanded it down so it was nice and flush and flat with the rest of the top. The front only had a few cracks, although I put way too much wood filler on, but I just wanted to make sure I got everything covered, and that way everything would be nice and smooth. It was then time to take off all the hardware, and I'm actually going to reuse this hardware on this project and see how it looked. So it was time to get sanding. And I know some people just do a scuff coat and then primer and paint. I decided for this first one just to take all the finish off down to the wood. And I used 120 grit, which went pretty quick, but was still pretty time consuming given everything that needed to be sanded down. One thing I'm learning about furniture restoration is drawers can be pretty stinky inside, and so what I did was actually just took a Scotch-Brite medium pad, just gave it a nice scuff coat just to get everything off. That's going to make it nice and smooth inside, and then give it a nice coat of polyurethane to seal it. Now on this project, I am going to do something a little different. I'm going to remove the base and put a new base on, and I learned this from DIY Wife. I'll leave a link for her channel below. Now this modern base doesn't work on every single type of piece of furniture, but I thought this would be a good candidate. So I bought some lumber and cut it down to the dimensions I wanted, and then started with the leg. I took 2 pieces of 3/4 inch and then glued them together to get the thickness that I wanted for my legs. I made the stock a little bit wider than necessary, and that way I can take them over to my table saw and then trim them down once they're glued together to the width that I want for each of my legs. Now it's time to cut them to length, and so I mark them out, cut them with my miter saw, and then arrange them with the grain pattern that I wanted. Now, I really liked planning this out, so I've got a good green pattern that matches the bottom. I want to put something that's nice and straight, and that way it'll give it a nice look. So I kind of looked at these and chose which one has a good, nice, straight green pattern on it that I want on the front, and that just really kind of adds those details that may not seem like a big deal, but can really set a project apart. I drew my dimensions on my legs for what kind of angle I was going to put on here, and then cut them out with a bandsaw. Now I like the bandsaw a lot better than doing this on a table saw or a miter saw. I think it's a lot safer. If you don't have a bandsaw, I would suggest a jigsaw, or even maybe even cutting them by hand. It may seem like you're taking a little bit more time, but I think it's going to be a lot safer as far as making a cut on such a small piece. Now I did make a few goofs on this project. I used pocket holes for the stretcher to attach to the legs, but as you can see, those pocket holes are actually facing down, and I decided to screw it together. Now, this isn't a big deal. I actually just unscrewed it after I was done and just flipped it around, but make sure you're paying attention to which way the pocket hole is going before you put it together. Another thing I did just to give it a nice look was use a piece of 1/4 inch plywood underneath the stretcher, and that just offsets that stretcher a little bit off the legs and gives it a nice look. So now it was time to remove the base, which was pretty interesting because this is the first time I'm doing something like this. So I thought it'd be easier just to get this up on my workbench and kind of figure out what's going on with the legs. And I found that there's just some screws that kind of held on the decorative piece. And so once I found that screw, I was able to get that off. Now this saw is a Japanese pole saw and it works really good for making a nice flush cut. But you gotta be careful because you don't want to run into this. That noise is a nail. So I had to come at it from a couple of different angles here and then try and avoid that nail so I didn't wreck my saw. The back legs, fortunately, didn't have any nails and those came out pretty nicely. So now it's time to sand the case, and this probably was the most time-consuming part of this project, especially in kind of the rounded, detailed parts on the front. Sandpaper wrapped around a putty or a spackle knife worked really good for getting into those tight spots and getting out that old finish. So it was finally time for paint. Now I used a latex paint that's all-in-one that has primer and paint built in, and in reality if I were to do this all over again I would use a primer first and then use paint because I still had to put on quite a few coats. After doing this project I've actually switched over to latex paint, which is designed more for cabinets and trim, has a little bit more durable finish and actually flows a little bit better. Before painting each piece I made sure to wipe each one off to make sure there's no dust or anything that would get under the paint, and then put just a nice even coat over each piece. Now this did take about 3 or 4 coats on the drawers and on the case, and that is a little bit of time consuming, but I really like spraying on products. It gives it a nice even finish, it gives it a nice soft look, and I really don't care for brush strokes, to be honest. I know some people like that, but I really like a nice smooth finish on my pieces. So in this project, I'm going to reuse the handles, and those did need some cleaning up, so I used a piece of fine steel wool to go over all these parts that would get any oils or any nasty off of these. And that way, when I spray painted these, it left a nice, flat, clean finish on all the hand. After paint, I coated everything with polyurethane. I put 2 coats on the outside and inside of all the drawers to give it some protection, as well as the case and on the top of the dresser. So now it's time to install the base. So I clamped it in place, got it aligned, and then screwed it to the bottom of the cabinet with my pre-drilled pocket holes. For the back of the cabinet, I just created some triangles that I'm going to use as braces for the back. I pre-drilled them with pocket holes and then attached it to the back legs as well as the bottom back of the cabinet. Now, one thing I'm learning about restoring furniture is wondering what thumbtacks were for, but I'm learning that those thumbtacks will just offset that drawer high enough so it doesn't hit the face frame when you're sliding the drawers in. With fresh paint on the cabinets and hardware and a new base, I put all the drawers in just to kind of get the full picture of what this would look like. I think how this turned out compared to what it looked like when I brought it home is just a complete transformation. I really like the bottom on it. I like the painted hardware black against the nice white. I think it gives it a nice look. So I put this up on Facebook Marketplace. I listed it for $250, and in about a week I had a call and they loved this piece. I think that's the most satisfying part of doing a project like this, is not just me liking it, but someone really enjoying this piece, and now it's going to go into their home and be a part of their lives. If you like this video, make sure to check out the link right here
on my next video, Furniture Flip, and we'll see you in the next video.